These are the war stories that sound like myth but are painfully real. Moments when humanity's darkest creativity met its deepest despair. Truth, in war, is stranger than legend. We hear tales passed down through generations, ghosts, phantoms, impossible feats, unspeakable horrors. We comfort ourselves by thinking they are just that, stories. Fables spun to explain the inexplicable, to cope with the trauma that war leaves etched upon our collective soul. They become the folklore of conflict, whispered in hushed tones, their sharp edges softened by time. But what if I told you these are not fiction? Behind the veil of myth, there lies a kernel of harrowing truth, documented and verified. These aren't tales of heroism spun for propaganda, or ghost stories to scare children. They are the documented, lived experiences of soldiers, civilians, caught in the gears of history's most brutal machines. These are the footnotes of history, too strange to be told, but too important to forget. Prepare yourself, for the truth we are about to uncover is far more unsettling than any myth. Chapter 1. War, you see, is not just a battle of bodies and steel. It is a war on the mind. It grinds away at a person's sanity, bit by bit, until the world they once knew is fractured beyond recognition. This was the fate of General Hermann Hoth, a man who once commanded armies with cold, Teutonic precision, a respected architect of the Blitzkrieg. But on the blood-soaked fields of Kursk, something within him shattered. The Battle of Kursk was a meat grinder on an unimaginable scale. It was the death rattle of the German war machine on the Eastern Front, a symphony of destruction that consumed men and machines by the tens of thousands. In the final, desperate days of the offensive, as his divisions were being systematically annihilated, General Hoth's reality began to unravel. He retreated not from the Red Army, but into a world of his own making, a world where he was still in command, where victory was still possible. He would point with a trembling finger, ordering Phantom Panzer divisions, units that had been wiped out days earlier, to execute complex flanking maneuvers. He would call for artillery barrages to cover the retreat of infantry companies that existed only in his memory. His voice, once a thunderous command, became a desperate whisper in the cavernous command bunker, a ghost directing other ghosts. The men around him had a choice. Do they obey the ravings of a broken commander, sending their last remaining soldiers to their certain doom? Or do they commit an act of mutiny, ignoring the orders of a man they once revered? They chose a third path, a path of quiet deception. They would acknowledge his orders, mark the phantom movements on their own maps, and send back falsified reports of success, all while trying to salvage what was left of the actual army. They were protecting him from the truth, and protecting their men from his madness. It was a theater of the absurd, played out amidst the very real carnage of the war's largest tank battle. Hoth, in his mind, was conducting a masterful, orderly withdrawal. In reality, his army was in a state of chaotic collapse. His story is a chilling reminder that the first casualty of war is often not the body, but the mind itself. It shows us how a man can be physically present on the battlefield, yet mentally lost in a war that only he can see, fighting an enemy that only he can imagine. We like to think of our enemies in war as faceless, a monolithic other. It's easier that way. It allows a pilot to pull the trigger, a soldier to charge a trench, without the crushing weight of shared humanity. But what happens when that face is not just human, but one you know, one you love? This is the story of two boys who grew up under the same sky, only to find themselves on opposite sides of a war that would force them to become hunter and hunted. The dogfight was, by all accounts, a masterclass in aerial combat, a deadly ballet of machines and men, a burst of cannon fire. It trailed smoke, spiraled, and plunged toward the earth below. A victory, a kill, another notch in the cold arithmetic of war. But when the victor landed, he found a wallet. Inside, a photograph. Two young boys. One of them was his fallen enemy. The other was him. The weight of that moment broke him. He took it upon himself to bury his friend. With his own hands, he carved a simple wooden cross. He inscribed a single word: brother. He walked away from that grave, and from the sky, forever. He never flew again. He had won the battle, but in doing so, he had lost a part of himself that could never be recovered. Some stories are so steeped in horror that they feel like they must be fiction. The story of Nazino Island is one such tale. It's a story the Soviet Union tried to erase. It begins not with an act of war, but with an act of chilling bureaucratic cruelty. Thousands were rounded up: undesirables, petty criminals, the unemployed, peasants who had fled the famine, people who had forgotten their internal passport at home. They were packed onto river barges with no food, no tools, and no idea where they were going. Their destination, Nazino Island. Over 6,000 souls were disgorged. A few sacks of raw flour. The first night, a snowstorm hit. Hundreds froze to death. Panic and desperation set in. Flour mixed with river water caused dysentery. Fights broke out. The island became a microcosm of hell. Guards tossed loaves, sparking deadly riots. They shot anyone who tried to swim. With no food source, deportees turned to the only one available: each other. Cannibalism became rampant. Gangs formed, hunting the weak. Huts were reportedly built from frozen corpses. The horror lasted just over a month. When authorities investigated, they found a wasteland. Of the 10,000 eventually sent to the island and camps, only 2,000 survived. The official report was classified. The island was scrubbed from maps, officially never existed. A mistake. How often do we use that word for small things? But in war, a mistake can be an apocalypse. In June 1944, Das Reich moved north, harassed by resistance. An officer was captured. Word said he was held in Oradour-sur-Vers. But the soldiers were sent to the wrong Oradour. They rolled into town, sealed off the exits. They rounded up every man, every woman, every child, the villagers, expecting identity checks. What followed was not an identity check. It was a methodical, cold-blooded massacre. Men to barns and sheds, shot in the legs, then burned. Women and over 400 children herded into the church. Incendiary device, barred doors. Those who tried windows were met with gunfire. By day's end, 642 civilians were dead. Only a handful survived. One woman crawled from a church window. After the war, General de Gaulle decreed it would never be rebuilt. Oradour-sur-Glane would stand as a permanent memorial. Today, rusted cars, a child's tricycle, a sewing machine, the doctor's car, a stone reminder. Remember? Hope in a prisoner of war camp is a dangerous and precious currency. It can keep a man alive, or it can get him killed. For a group of prisoners in Stalag Luft 3, not just one tunnel, but 3, codenamed Tom, Dick, Harry. This wasn't just an escape, it was industrial-scale defiance. But there is another, lesser-known story, bordering on the supernatural. In another camp, ordinary men, no wood for shoring, no bellows, no forged documents, no civilian clothes. All they had were their hands, their wits, and spoons. For months they dug, a tunnel over 100 meters long, relentless, back-breaking labor. In secret, they worked in shifts, scratching with spoons and tin cans, hiding dirt in their trousers, scattering it in the exercise yard. Then, one moonless night, 200 men, one by one, crawled into the narrow, suffocating darkness. They emerged into the cool night air, and then they vanished. When the guards discovered the escape, the number was unbelievable. A massive manhunt. It yielded almost nothing. Years later, researchers dug, used ground-penetrating radar. They found nothing. As if the Earth had healed the wound, leaving unbroken soil and a ghost story. 200 men who simply vanished into the Earth. There are many ways to fight a war. You can fight with guns, with tanks, with bombs. In the winter of 1942, Leningrad was a frozen circle of hell, besieged, its people starving. Amidst this despair, Karl Eliasberg was tasked with performing Shostakovich's Seventh Symphony, the Leningrad Symphony. The orchestra barely existed. Musicians scattered, starving, or dead. Only 15 remained. He pulled players from military bands. They began rehearsals. They could only play for 15 minutes. Rations increased, breath pluming in the unheated hall. Music punctuated by distant explosions. On August 9, 1942, the Philharmonic Hall was packed, broadcast across the city and over enemy lines. Soviet guns bombarded German positions to ensure silence for the symphony. As the first notes rose, the guns fell silent. German soldiers listened, stunned. They heard the roar of an unbroken soul. In the early hours of February 25, 1942, just a few months after Pearl Harbor, Los Angeles was gripped. Sirens wailed. Wardens spotted lights, unidentified objects moving slowly over the coastline. A total blackout was ordered. The City of Angels plunged into darkness. Then the 37th Coast Artillery Brigade opened fire. For over an hour, a storm of steel tore the night. Searchlights converged on something, or perhaps nothing. Over 1,400 rounds were fired. Shrapnel rained, the city trembled. By dawn, the guns fell silent. An all clear sounded. The city waited for casualty lists from a Japanese raid. But there were none. No bombs, no planes shot down, no wreckage. The Navy called it war nerves. The Army suggested weather balloons. But photos and eyewitness accounts tell a different story. Strange patterns of light, objects held in searchlights, shrugging off direct hits. The event became a cornerstone for UFO researchers, who believed the city wasn't firing at balloons, but at something else entirely. We may never know the truth. Was it mass hysteria, a meteorological event, or was something truly there that night, something we weren't meant to see?